Are you a businesswoman who is finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Elizabeth Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. Every week, get valuable lessons from Elizabeth or learn from her roundtable conversations with experts and speakers on how to make a difference, not just a point. On to the show with your host, Elizabeth Bachman.
Hello and welcome to Speakers Who Get Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman, your host, and today we're sharing a little something special, different from what we usually do, but also in the theme of diversity, because this is a podcast where we talk about leadership, communication, and diversity, inclusion, and acceptance. Last time, I promoted an episode with Dr. Minette Norman and Dr. Karolin Helbig about the psychological safety playbook. And in the conversations around recording their episode with them, Dr. Karolin mentioned that it was Pride Month and she has a son who is transgender. She said she would very much like to share what she learned about psychological safety. And her son, Kai, who is 18, had said that he would like to talk as well. So we recorded this in June as a LinkedIn Live, and I'm now rebroadcasting it on this platform so that you can see and hear a bit more about what's it like to be in that kind of relationship. Before we start, let me give you the biographies. Kai, as I said, is 18 and is not a public person, so we are not sharing his picture or his bio. But his mother, Karolin, her bio is that building on more than 2 decades of experience as a management consultant in leadership development, along with a deep expertise in science, Karolin Helbig helps leaders increase their effectiveness, optimize team performance, and transform their organizations through mindset, emotional intelligence, and psychological safety. She serves large international corporations as well as smaller companies and nonprofit organizations and is known for bridging the gap between theory and practice. Previously, Karolin spent more than 15 years as a top management consultant at McKinsey & Company, working as a trusted advisor and in some cases, a coach to solve her clients' toughest issues. She integrated world-class problem-solving, industry experience, and proprietary tools and capabilities to create change and lasting impact with organizations in industries from banking to public service to chemicals in Europe and the Middle East. While in that role, Karolin saw firsthand how real transformation is not the result of optimized processes and systems, but the result of transforming people leadership. Prior to McKinsey, Dr. Karolin received her PhD in human genetics from the Philipps University in Marburg, Germany. And today she integrates neuroscience findings that revolutionize the way we understand how human brains function and translates them into applicable actions and powerful leadership practices. So that is the mother's bio. For Kai, you'll have to hear it from himself. I found this a fascinating and illuminating interview. I'm so excited to be sharing it with you. On to the interview with Karolin and Kai Helbig. Kai Helbig, Karolin Helbig, willkommen to Speakers Who Get Results.
Hello. Hi, Elizabeth. Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you. Well, we're excited to have you here. We're doing this recording because I have another podcast episode, traditional podcast episode, with Karolin and her co-author, Minette Norman, who've written a book about psychological safety at work. And this is Dr. Karolin. So, and she said, oh, I have a trans child who has taught me a lot about psychological safety. So we are recording this in June of 2024, which is Pride Month, and celebrates lesbian, gay, bi, transsexual, and all the variations in between. So I'm very curious to have Kai talk about his, the way he perceives this. So, and before we start, Karolin, I have your answer in the other podcast, other episode, but Kai, I always ask, who would be your dream interview? If you were to talk to somebody from history, who would it be, and what would you ask them, and who should be listening?
I think just because we're on this trans topic right now, I think it would be either Kurt Cobain or Joan of Arc. Because from both of their stories, I get a lot of things that I can relate to as a trans person. And I'm just curious to know how they feel about that, how they would relate to that story of being transgender.
Okay, so for those who aren't familiar with Kurt Cobain, who was he, and what would you ask him?
He was the lead singer of Nirvana, a rock band whose most famous track, I believe, is "Smells Like Teen Spirit." And just in the way that he lived and in a lot of the lyrics that he wrote, I can see some of what I have experienced and come to name as gender dysphoria. For example, there's a lyric in one of his songs that goes, "I swear I don't have a gun," which you can obviously say, okay, maybe it's just about not being armed, but there might be a deeper level to that. And
referring to a body part, perhaps.
Perhaps.
Part of the
and
body.
Also in the way that he died is just a thing I've seen happen before with trans people in my not very near but still proximity, over 5 corners or something. The way that if you don't have a way of naming what this feeling is, this feeling of dysphoria, this feeling of being not in tune with your body and your gender, what it does to a person, I think, well, I would describe it as vibes mainly that I get from it.
And then Joan of Arc, I can guess, but what would you ask Joan of Arc?
I would ask Joan of Arc mainly if she was satisfied with the way men and women are, well, tasked with different things in society, and those different things have different weights to them, different ways people view them, different worths attached to them. And also if she had the choice, would she be a man or a woman?
Very good question. And one of the things about Joan of Arc is that there's an old saying that heroes are no fun to live with at home. And, Joan of Arc was great while she was rallying the troops. And then once they won, she was way too dangerous to have around. And so the church did the best to put her back in the box that she'd broken out of. So there's lots have been written about that. Thank you very much. Tell me a little bit, starting with you, Kai, trans kid born as a girl. What was it like to realize that you were really male inside, that your gender dysphoria?
That was really difficult because there wasn't any education on transgender being even a thing that exists when I was growing up. And
you're 18 now, right?
I'm 18 now.
Yes, all right.
But when I was around 12, I started, started puberty and felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And I only learned about transgender and trans dysphoria and things being a thing when I went to England for a year at 14, 15, where I found out about it and pretty quickly drew the line to myself and found a way to relate to that and to find myself in it. And then I started my journey from there, tried out different labels, different identities, different names before I finally landed on this one. And I've had this one for 3 years now, I think. And I'm very happy.
Good. So Karolin, as a straight cisgender mother, what was it like for you to have your kid come home from England and say, guess what, Mom? Or whatever it was Kai said.
Yeah, that's a huge learning journey. And my feeling is I'm in the middle of the learning journey, and I always there's so much I have to learn. And yeah, cis and straight. When I discussed with Kai about, okay, how was it for you to discover this? And in our family, was I helpful? Was I not helpful? And I remember conversations when I didn't do a good job in realizing what's going on and being supportive and so on, because this was all new to me and I had to learn so much. And yeah, I was just relieved that Kai said, yeah, at some points he could have done better, but altogether it was okay, or sometimes even good. And even when we discussed about this, we landed on, okay, I'm non-queer. So and how is it to be raised by a non-queer mom and being a queer kid? And this expression, being non-queer, is also some kind of, this is a nice way to put it, instead of, okay, kind of, this is implying the normal, the usual, the main, the majority, the normal one.
I love that. Now, is that an English phrase that you use, or are you translating from German? Non-queer.
It works in both languages, rather the same.
Okay.
I think the first time I used the phrase, it was in English, but
it's exactly the same.
It's a coincidence that it was English the first time I used it, because I was talking English to a friend of mine. So.
While we're talking about that, Kai, tell us what pronouns you use and how do you refer to yourself, and how did you decide what made the right decision?
Yeah, I use he and him pronouns pretty much
German?
exclusively in German. In English, I'm a bit more flexible about it, but it's still mainly he and him. And I refer to myself not as a man because I feel I'm a bit too young to be a full-grown man yet. So I just call myself a guy most of the time, or a boy.
Which German words do you use? We have a large German audience, so
I use German. In German, I like the word Jugendlicher.
Jugendlicher, okay.
Which is
young one. Yes.
It's just really a very nice description of the age I'm at. And about how I got to realize that most of it was trial and error, just trying out different pronouns, different ways of referring to myself. and feeling sort of out which ones feel the best, which ones feel the most comfortable, which ones feel the most natural, I'd say, to use, which ones feel right and which ones don't.
Karolin, you talk about psychological safety in business. At what point did you realize that this applied to life at home as well? Or was it the other way around?
In a way, it was very much the other way around, because I was a mom long before I focused on psychological safety as a topic for my leadership consultancy. So, and as a mom, it was always key, really core for me to create an atmosphere where my kids, I'm a mom of four, not all sons, they all feel seen and heard and loved. And it was very important to me. For example, I don't know, I tried to really see, okay, what is it that this kid is interested right now, and how can I support this interest? For example, with activities, with books, with input, with whatever it is, creative stuff. So this was my journey as a mom, and much later as a leadership consultant, I focused on psychological safety. And of course, this is not coincidence, because creating an atmosphere where people feel seen and heard and loved, respected, is of course the key to psychological safety. So it applies to the private life as well as to the business life. People need to feel that way in order to be their best self. And I would say, first of all, I, as a mom, learned how important it is to create a nice atmosphere for everyone to be able to grow into their best self. And then, as a leadership consultant, I focused on psychological safety. And I see all the parallels.
All the parallel. Well, it's an interesting, one of the other things that you mentioned before we started this recording is the link between psychological safety and queerness, and how queer people can be like canaries in the coal mine to, I guess, to alert us that something's going wrong. And Kai, I don't know if that was your question or if that was Karolin's question.
That was my my way of putting things, was that if a place is visibly unsafe for queer people, for minorities, for everybody who might feel excluded in a way, that is your alert that it's only safe on a condition. And as soon as a space is only safe for you on the condition that you fit in, it's no longer safe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Kai explained it that way, and then I came up with this metaphor, the canaries in the mine, because then you have an early indicator. Oh, something's wrong. Something's not as good as it should be. And I think it's important to create an atmosphere where the canaries can flourish so that everyone can flourish.
And for those who are unfamiliar with the phrase canaries in the coal mine, is in the coal mines, they would bring down a canary in the cage. And if the air is bad, if there's not enough oxygen, the canary will faint before the humans will. So if you see the canary lying on the bottom of the cage with their claws up, then you say, okay, get out, because the air is not good.
Yeah.
So it's a warning signal.
Exactly.
Hard on the poor canaries, but
well, for that, I've got an interesting fact. Is the miners would get really attached to their birds, and they built, even in some instances, little revivifying machines for them so they could live longer.
The extra oxygen for the canaries.
Yeah,
I would think so too. I think, you're down in the dark in the coal mine, you've got this bright yellow bird. It's got to be something. The next question, you spoke about the difference between, so you talk about queerness, the difference between gender identity and sexual orientation. So for those to whom this is a new thought or who lump everything together at once, tell us, please, how do you define the difference?
Me? No?
Yeah, I agree.
Go
It's
ahead,
better
Kai. I
than
think that's your question. Yes.
There's the difference between gender identity and sexuality is quite curtly put into sexuality is who you're attracted to. Gender identity is who you are.
Very good. Yes, I like that. Okay. And I'm gonna,
yeah,
will be
and
one of our
maybe a
quotable
little bit,
quotes. Yes.
just to add to what you asked earlier, and when I mentioned, okay, I'm feeling I'm not at all at the end of my learning journey. What Kai and I, we are discussing a lot, and this is the point where I think big learning lies also for business, is to kind of going beyond the binary boxes. So that was the label Kai started with, being non-binary. And I love this idea that we are, and that's, I think, the learning invitation to all of us to realize that these boxes are really limiting us. The
Yes.
box female, male, and to really kind of go beyond this and realize we are all on a spectrum. And
Yes.
we are, every single one of us could build their own box, I think. And we are not doing people a favor by labeling them, by putting them in a box and not letting them out. It's really something very limiting. And I'd love business to go more into this direction and treat everyone in your team, in your company, wherever you are, and realize the person you are sitting in front of as a unique person, and every single box with a single person in it, and not a box where you put a big category and all people in it. And yeah,
also especially
Kai has a lot of ideas.
Yeah, I've got a lot to say about that because I've put a lot of thought into it, obviously, in these past 5 years or so. The boxes male and female they can be very useful, but they're very much optional. For example, I've got a cisgender male friend who went through his own journey of examining his gender, examining the societal stereotypes associated with gender, and then landing on the decision that the gender binary isn't a perfect construction, and it's very much a model of a way of looking at the world. But that realization didn't require him to change his gender. He's still a guy.
Yeah, I think, it's a shortcut. It's a shortcut. It's an easy code to say we are one or the other. And many of the things I talk about is how different people think, which traditionally has been connected with men's language and women's language. And yet in the last several decades, as we learn more about how there's such a spectrum, not everybody is all one thing at once. But there are some things you can use it as a way to begin understanding.
Yeah, it's a starting point.
Yeah, it's a starting point. Use it as a very simplifying model, and then be fluid in your perception, in the way you interact with the other persons, and not be so rigid with these boxes.
Yes, I love the way people can be a little bit of both. Last week I was in New York City and was meeting a friend at the restaurant, and the person who checked me in and said, yes, we have your reservation. Beautiful young woman, and actress. She was talking to her friends about the play. She was, every waiter in New York is an actor or an actress. And then took the menu and said, "Come, your table is right over there." And I said, okay, good for that. And, there's a deep bass voice. And I thought, New York City. I love being in New York. So let's go to the do's and the don'ts. And I don't know if you have that list in front of you. Would you like me to read it, or do you want to just begin? You sent me a beautiful long list.
Yeah,
if you could read it, please.
Go ahead and read. But maybe one starting point, and that's relating to this point. What came first, kind of creating an atmosphere where my kids can grow into their best selves, and then psychological safety as a topic as a leadership consultant. And I think there are so many similarities, for example, and that's really key, and that's always something I discuss with my clients. That's the most important thing you can do, to really, really listen. And I think that is the key in any relationship, to really listen with the intent to understand, and not with the intent to judge, to fight, to argue against, and to put forward your own story and so on. Yes. So and I this is something I always tried with Kai, and I know a lot of instances I wasn't at my best, and I did a poor job. However, this is always something I tried to do, and Kai said, it wasn't too bad.
It wasn't too bad, and you're a whole person as well, aren't you?
Yeah.
And you have your own troubles and trials and tribulations, and of course you won't be able to do a 100% psychologically perfect job as a mother all the time.
But I think this was key. Through all the ups and downs we went together, Kai and I, that we never, at no moment, we lost this listening to each other, particularly listening, I as a mom to Kai, and this phase of finding the identity. And so this was key for us in this learning journey.
Well, and so many of us are programmed to listen and then try to fix it. So just listening is hard. And I would say to anyone out here who feels like they're not heard, anyone who's listening to this conversation, it's okay to say to your friend, I don't want you to fix anything. I just want you to hear me. Because chances are the friend is going to try to fix it, because that's what society teaches us to do. So, it's okay to start off by saying, I think I just want to talk, and try not to fix it.
Yeah, that is a thing that I do a lot with my neurodivergent friends, of which I have a whole lot. Is when we have to vent to each other, when we have to rant to each other, we first set down ground rules, okay? Either I'm looking for a solution, I'm looking for emotional support, I just need to get it out of my system. Those are the three main versions of the rant.
Yes, and very important, very important. So here, this wonderful list, and we will publish this in the show notes, is don't assume that how you are is the norm and everything else is a deviant. Don't have a fixed expectation of how the other should be or behave, and don't laugh at the other or make jokes about what is unusual to you.
Yeah, and maybe, Elizabeth, may I add?
I'm going to ask you to comment on those three.
Yeah, not having expectation how the other should be. This is not easy, never, and particularly as the mother. And even though maybe you don't explicitly have expectations, you have implicit expectations. And when these expectations aren't met, and maybe something comes out completely different than you would have expected. This is not an easy thing to be confronted with, and you need, I can remember some situations where I really had this, oh my goodness, this is completely different from what I would have expected, and it's not easy to become friend with a new situation.
Also, I'd say as a child, you pick up on your parents' expectations and disappointments, even if they're implicit, even if your parents haven't even realized them, perhaps, but you pick up on it and you notice that and you internalize that.
Yes, yes. Now, the do's are be non-judgmental and listen. We spoke about that. Get really curious. How does that reflect in business and in the family?
Well, let me go into queerness first. Is I realized my gender identity through asking questions, asking myself questions, but also, really importantly, my mother asking the right questions. Because I talked to my mother at one point about being non-binary, and she asked this one really important question that kick-started an entire inner process for me. And the question was, do you think you'd still be non-binary if you were born a boy? And the answer to that question was no. And I hadn't really thought about that before. So that's a little anecdote to illustrate curiosity and asking questions. It just leads you down new paths of thought.
Karolin, do you have more to say?
I think let's not underestimate the amazing power of curiosity. And this applies to business as well. And I think it's the perfect antidote, for example, for being judgmental, even with expectations. In a way, you are judgmental, right? Because if the other person is not meeting the expectation, it's kind of the implicit judgment about it. And you can cure this with really deliberately shifting to curiosity. Sometimes it's not easy, but it's something we can commit to. We can deliberately shift to curiosity and really wanting to understand the other person. Tell me who you are. Tell me how the world looks like from your point of view. Tell me what your experiences are. Tell me how you perceive everything, things like that. And this is something I try to do, and I realize when I'm not able to do that, when I don't have a good day, when I'm running out of energy, whatever, when I'm too much into my judgments and expectations. However, it's something you can reflect on. And sometimes when something happens which I think was not, I'm sorry for that. We sleep a night, and then I come back to Kai and say, hey, listen, I said something, I did something, and I regret, and let's talk about that.
So I have to ask you now, what happens if you have to be the strong mom and the strong mother and say, Kai, this was not good. Kai, my teenager. You sound like you are always perfect in listening. What happens when you have to say, no, that doesn't work?
Can I?
Go ahead.
My mother says no, that doesn't work in a way that isn't being the strong or the hard mother. She does this in very much the same way in which she listens, which is just really safely, and I'd say also kindly. She never puts any blame on me. She never says, oh, how could you be so stupid? She says, oh, this situation is not optimal. How can we how can we improve this situation? How can we solve this problem that might have arisen? What can we do? Oh, you forgot to take your, I don't know, you forgot to take your passport. What can we do? How can we solve this? And not, you forgot to take your passport. Why didn't you take your passport? Because obviously asking that question is futile because the passport isn't there.
Can I add to that, Elizabeth?
Yes.
Because I see also implications for business. I think it's key to put relationship first.
You said connection before content. The next piece I wanted to say. So I think that's where we are. And in the last question is connection before content. Yes. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, and I think it's so key that if there's something unfavorable or negative or challenging, difficult, whatever, that you're not beginning to be antagonists fighting with each other, one against the other. It's more, okay, let's be together in it and try to come out of this and try to solve this. So not opposing each other, but side by side looking to the problem.
Okay.
Never making
so
the other person's problem.
So we're almost out of time for this part of the conversation. Let me just ask you each one final question. Karolin, if we have someone listening who says, they're telling my story, help, I need to know more about this. What would you say to the child that they should ask their parents? What should the child know?
Oh, wow.
One thing.
That's a question. I'd love to think more deeply about it.
Okay, let me ask, then I will ask Kai first.
Excellent.
Kai, what would
I dare to offer? One thing is the immediate reactions from the parents often don't have so much to do with you, child. They have more to do with the own problems, issues the parents have.
Parents are people.
Yeah, parents are people. Yeah.
Okay. And the other way around, Kai, what would you say to any parents who are listening who say, I think this is what's going on with my child. How can I be the best parent?
I would say a very, very important thing to remember about children and young people is we're not yet, we're not people who aren't yet complete. We are people trying to find ourselves. It's a subtle difference to pick up on, but it's key. It's important to remember that your child is at a stage of their life where they're trying to find their footing, where they're trying to figure out who they are, and that makes them incredibly vulnerable. And that vulnerability puts a lot of responsibility, of course, on the people in their lives who've already found their footing, who've grown up, who have hopefully a stable home and job. So just try to give a lifeline to your child, that a railing that they can grab hold of when they lose their footing in any way, and say, hey, I've got you. And the child has to take the steps themselves, but you can be there and say, in case you fall, I'm here.
I love that. What a great conversation. This is going to be really wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me. And if anyone has further questions, you can message. We'll put contact information in the into the show notes here. This has been Speakers Who Get Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman. I'll see you on the next one.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Elizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.